From Bosstrack, it's Her HypeSquad, a show about amazing women who've made incredible strides as leaders in their industry. They're here to support you in your leadership growth, to encourage you and hype you up as part of your Hype Squad. Hello everyone, Michelle Harris here, welcoming you back to another episode that's sure to add a few tools to your leadership toolkit. In this episode of Her HypeSquad with Bosstrack, I have the pleasure of bringing you insights from Elizabeth McCalley, the CEO of StartStak. Today's conversation covers quite a bit, from the art of professional resilience to the often underestimated power of intuition. We also talk about the profound significance of time and handling no-win situations. But it's not all business. We also venture into raising chickens and culinary experimentation. And before we jump into our conversation, let me set the stage with a little bit of information about Elizabeth. As the CEO and founder of StartStak, Elizabeth is a results-driven executive enabling strategy and go-to-market for early-stage companies. She is AI native and excels in developing new markets through use of emerging technologies. She brings extensive experience in nascent markets, industry solution development, marketing, partnerships, and alliances. Elizabeth has a passion for developing new markets and is on a mission to broadly enable entrepreneurship through a new business design. StartStak is founded for the founders. If you enjoyed my conversation with Elizabeth, be sure to subscribe to our channel and help more people find us by sharing this episode with others or by leaving a review. Or subscribe to our weekly newsletter filled with things we found that we're excited about and were inspired by, along with valuable leadership advice to watch, listen to, or read. It's a little bit of joy for your inbox each Monday. You can subscribe at www.thebosstrack.com/weeklyjoy. Now, without further delay, here's my conversation with Elizabeth McCalley. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us on Her HypeSquad with Bosstrack. We're excited, or I'm excited, to talk to you today and ready to get into our conversation.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much for having me on your show.
I would love for you to start out the conversation by giving the audience a little bit of an idea of who you are in your own words.
I think about myself, I call myself a dreamer, thinker, and tinkerer. I've been in the technology industry as a non-technical business leader for, 20 years. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, very close to the airport by design. Personally, I'm a mom. I've got a daughter in art school, and I have a son in high school who wants to go to cooking school. So I have kids who are creatives. I like to garden, spend time outside. I raise chickens. I think I'm a master hobbyist as well. So like to try a little bit of everything. And I think I've also done that throughout my career. So I'm really excited to talk to you.
Thank you for that intro. I've seen quite a few videos of chickens lately on my Instagram feed, so it's been very interesting. Are you involved in recording your chickens at all, or is it more just a...
No, the backyard chicken culture, I think, is fully taken off. I think I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I am a member of the Backyard Chicken Forum because sometimes, if there's one of them gets sick, or I had one got attacked by a hawk, actually. Her name's Lucky Chicken. And I actually did take her to the vet to get about 20 stitches on the back of her neck. I'm surprised she lived, but she's about 8 years old now. So yeah, I've learned a lot about animal care just by tapping into this network of people who love raising chickens. It's an interesting little hobby I have.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, not that we want to talk about chickens the whole time, but they do have a unique personality. I never realized they had.
They do. They're very interesting creatures. They know their names. They'll hang out. They're very tame. And it's getting the security right around your chicken coop is really important because they're very susceptible to predators. So, we've learned along the way as well, but it's not as difficult as raising bees. So I tried to do that one year, and my bees absconded, and they said, we're out of here. This is not a great place to live. They had gotten attacked by ants. And so raising bees is very, very difficult. So I'll try that again at some point, but I've got a lot going on right now.
Yeah. Well, I know what we talked a little while ago about resilience and moving through excuse me, moving through changes in our lives. And we talk about that as the seasons of change. And you had provided a great description of what that means to you. And I'd love for you to share that with the audience, just to give them a little background on our discussion, kind of as a setup.
Yeah, I think we talk about these big words, resilience and growth, and they're just master words that have this well of meaning. It means different things for different people. But when I think about seasons of change as it respects to career, we have this stuff we go through in our life. There's weddings and babies and divorces and caregiving. And even when people don't make those kinds of family decisions, there's friends and relationships, all the things that we go through in our life throughout our career. And those events, call them, are really different for everybody. But those are things that we manage through, and two, while we're also managing our careers. Mm-hmm. And so I think that having an intentional conversation about, seasons of life and career as they intersect, I think is really important, because having babies and getting married is all fun and cute. But going through a divorce is not. Mm-hmm. Being a caregiver is not really something people want to talk about openly as their career persona. Even kind of going through incredibly difficult situations in work, where you might be in a highly toxic political environment, or you're working on a project that you absolutely know will fail, and also at the same time doing whatever it is you're doing in your life personally, and then managing those boundaries appropriately. This kind of stuff is really hard, and it's not a lot. There's not a lot of resources out there for people who haven't been through these big life experiences before, and they really, frankly, don't know what to do. So I think it's important to have a community with a lot of openness about these really challenging topics. So, there's a way to think about it and process it and plan and figure out how to get through it and how to do these things that are complicated on their own. And you mix in career, and it becomes, I think, really difficult for people sometimes.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing maybe a change that you went through in life, or that had an impact on your career in either a positive or a negative way?
A personal change?
Or personal or career, whatever, as you just defined, it changes.
I think when my mom passed away, that was a really interesting experience. And it was interesting for a couple of ways. I had been selected to be part of IBM's corporate service corps. And so this opportunity was an incredible opportunity. There's, this design was, they select teams go to pre-emerging markets, everybody from a different country going to a different country, small teams, about 10 people or less. Mm. And you apply. At the time they had this program, and people applied. It was highly competitive. It was an international stretch assignment, essentially. And they took people from different roles and kind of all put them together and say, okay, this is your team. This is where you're going. This is when you're leaving. And you're gone into this new job for about a month and a half or so. There's 3 months of pre-work, 3 months of post-work. So it's not an insignificant amount of work, but while you're in country, you're really dedicated to that work, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so that opportunity is awesome. At the same time, my mom, she was living with, my parents lived in Florida. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. And she was going through her season of, I don't want to call it a season, that sounds terrible, but she was going through her fight with breast cancer that had been going on for, I don't know, 7-8 years. And it was really difficult because I called her and it's like, what if you die?
Mm.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little choked.
No. Take your time.
It was very difficult. And she said, you have to go. And so I told my manager, what if my mom dies? And they said, we'll put you on a plane and we'll get you home. And it was a really, really difficult time. And what was amazing about it is when it came back. I'm sorry, I didn't really mean to get I shouldn't have started talking about this. I met a lot of other people who also in their career had gone through something like this. And it was a lot because I was the person in my family that took care of everything. And I sat with my mom and she planned her funeral. Mm-hmm. And we did that together. And it was amazing. Mm-hmm. It was really, really amazing because we shared that last 3 weeks together. And I would never, ever take that time back. And so what was hard about that is when it came home, I knew something was wrong. And I told my manager, hey, I just got back from Turkey. I know I've been gone for a month and a half, but I need to take time off. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to need to go be with my mom. And I'll let you know what's going on when I get there. And I could have said, I got to catch up on work. I could have said, I can't go right now because I've been gone out of my job for a month and a half in another country and just coming back and reintegrating into, society when you've been living in a place that's thousands and thousands of miles away from home. Like that's a whole thing on its own, is just to do that.
Right.
And my gut said, you got to go be with your mom. And I did that. And it was a very, very, very important decision. And I didn't realize it at the time until years later, when I have people in my work, in my life, it's like, you're not going to get that time back.
Yeah.
You got to go. You got to go do that. Whatever it is going on at work, it can wait. And you got to go do that thing because you're never, ever getting that time back. And I know people talk about, well, I miss my kids' dance class or the play and those kinds of things. And I think this is really hard for people to discern what is really, really, really important and what is, what are those things that are like, okay, I can't do that and it's going to be okay anyway. Mm-hmm. I had a leader one time and he talked about glass balls and rubber balls. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, and I'd love for you to share it.
Yeah, he was an amazing leader. Mm-hmm. And he would say, you've got balls that you're going to drop and they're going to bounce. And you've got balls that are going to drop and they're going to break. And I think that's part of our growth journey as we're really becoming more mature and discerning about our choices and decisions, and everything is a choice. Mm-hmm. Everything has a consequence, and some consequences are greater than others. And that visual of glass balls and rubber balls are, that's for me, I can look and like, okay, this decision, like I got to drop this ball, or I don't even need to carry this ball anymore. I just got to get rid of it altogether. And so we're managing this complexity. And I think that there's a way to think about it, and it's very individual, very personal. That's my thought on that.
I love the way you put that with the rubber balls versus the glass balls. And you mentioned missing a dance class. And I know there are a lot of things to weigh. Like, am I missing the dance class because of something critical and important at work? Or am I missing it because it's something that can be put off till tomorrow? So, you're making those choices. But at the same time, I think there's an overall picture of, of course, if you're in a place where you're missing all the dance classes, that's a problem. But if you
Mm-hmm.
have to miss one for something that's critical, I mean, those are kind of those judgment calls that people need to
Mm-hmm.
make.
Right. And I mean, think, um, as women who choose to be moms, or, whatever our responsibility is around family and our choices with that, there's nothing but guilt that goes with it.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like you feel guilty for working, you feel guilty for not working. Maybe you don't, I don't know, but there's all this judgment that surrounds people's individual choices around how to conduct themselves, their life, their family. And somehow we feel like we have to ascribe to someone else's guidelines about what we should be doing. And it's taken me a bit of time to get comfortable in my own skin that I just doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you don't agree with it. And I'm sorry you think I should be doing something else. And yes, I absolutely am the mom that's going to forget the PTA shirt for whatever for the bus trip. But I guarantee I know the mom who does think about that. And I have a relationship with that person, call them, say, hey, like I dropped the ball on this. Can you help me out?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think this guilt thing around what we should be doing versus what we are doing, you gotta let go of that, because we just can't put energy that way. It doesn't serve us well.
Yeah, I so agree with that, and I wish that's like one thing we could just push through the microphone or the speakers where people are listening to really take that to heart and to use that philosophy and apply it to your career and life earlier rather than later,
Yeah.
because it is so true. It's like you really do end up coming to that conclusion later in your career and life, but it would be
Mm-hmm.
so helpful to have that mentality early on, I think, for our mental well-being and for our success.
Yeah. I think social media is, I think it puts a lot of pressure on people. And so we talk
Mm-hmm.
about, they used to say like, keep your eyes on your own paper,
Yeah.
right? And I think social media, it's very easy to look at someone else's career path or journey or whatever it is they're doing, and to not really fully understand that it's unhelpful for us to compare our own journey with someone else's.
Mm.
It's like, you should be a director at this point, and you should be a VP at this point, and why aren't you setting your sights on being a CEO or whatever? It's like everybody has their own journey. And I think it's really easy for people to compare what they should be doing compared to what everyone else is doing. And there is lots of things that we don't know about other people.
Yeah.
And it's just good to keep your eyes on your own paper.
Yeah, it's so true. I think I spoke with somebody recently about, you might think that the grass is greener, but it actually might be astroturf. So I love how she put that. So can I ask you, when you came back and asked or said, I need to take this time, have you had people ask you, or could you offer maybe some advice for people that are a little scared to have a conversation like that with their boss, how to approach that conversation?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what it's about.
Mm.
I remember my daughter's 20. I can't believe that. She's 20. But I distinctly remember dropping her off at daycare, 6 weeks old, and crying all the way to work.
Yeah.
That felt awful. And at the time, 20 years ago, the policy was if you had a normal birth, you're back to work in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was family medical leave, but I don't know. I can't remember what it was like then, but I just think about now when people take an entire year off or 6 months off or whatever. And I think, wow, that's just, I can't even remember what that would have been like, because I don't think that was a choice for me at the time. And so the point of that is, knowing the environment, hopefully there's good relationships with your leadership team and those kinds of things, but companies have different cultures. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what makes it hard to sort of ascribe some standard for how to handle something, because I've worked in incredible environments where there's a lot of support for working moms and going through some of the life events that I've been through, where it's a people first type of culture. And I've also worked in environments that is not about people at all. It's about pretty much beating the snot out of people to get things done. And we're not really all that happy about having people at all. So, I mean, it really, I think you've got to read the room. It's the point of all that. Read the room and then figure out what is it that you really need. Yeah. Because taking time that feels maybe a bit like a luxury, maybe I don't need that much time, but then maybe I really do. And if I really do, then what are my options as an employee to be able to take the time that I really do need? And I've seen people that have gone through very difficult personal circumstances where family medical leave was absolutely important. And they took that time to go take care of what they needed to do. They came back considering that sometimes, depending on the circumstance that someone's going through, it's better to take that time and to have that space than to bring all that to work. Yeah. Because that can be very devastating for people. And so if there's a fear about having a conversation about asking for time or whatever, and consider that if you don't, and you bring the baggage to work from whatever's going on personally, that can have very detrimental negative effects to your career and relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine it's kind of like going into a negotiation. You kind of know what your must-haves and what you can flex on when you go into the conversation. But the important thing is to actually be brave enough to have the conversation if you've determined that that's what you need, because you never know, and it might not be exactly the outcome that you want, but it might turn out to be a situation that is manageable for you and still helps you both sides get to where they need to be.
Yeah, like figuring out the win-win, coming with a win-win and knowing how to negotiate well. That's a balanced negotiation. That's also, it's an art and a skill. It's really important in business.
Yeah. Can you, I know this is something that you mentioned just in passing when you were describing the change earlier. You mentioned being on a project that you knew wasn't going to be successful. And it caught my ear because, I mean, I've been in that such situation before. I know a lot of people have been in that situation. Have you had a particular experience with that you could talk to us about, and how to mentally kind of think about that?
Yeah, I used to think about myself as like, I'm a fireman, show up in a burning house. I've been in so many situations that I've been asked to lead, manage, whatever, and they're not good situations. My first memory of this was taking a role as a first line sales manager for a business analytics team. And the executive that wanted me to do this role, he said, look, there's going to be two outcomes to this job. You're going to be at 0% at the end of the year, or you're going to be at 200%. And there's no middle ground, because we've taken all the quota from the previous years and we buried it in this territory. And so your job is actually to make sure no one quits. We've got to get this team to the next year. And so kind of took a step back, and it's like, wow, that's very honest. Mm-hmm. And so what does that mean for me as a leader leading a team that by measurement for people who are salespeople is revenue? Mm-hmm. What does that mean for them to lead a team where we know that we're going to be 0% or 200%? There's a lot that's out of our control. And I felt like being authentic about that situation was the best path. Because if you're dishonest about what people are going to be experiencing throughout the course of a year and what's on the other side of that, it would be very hard to keep them engaged, right? Yeah. So it became sort of a mission to not quit, a mission to, if we do fail, and we very likely could, that we have all these other metrics that show, the process of building for the next year, because that really was our job, is to build for the next year. And sure enough, the following year, it's a blowout year. But when you work in an enterprise space with giant accounts, the largest companies you can think of in this, area of the country I live in, that's kind of what we were up against. And nobody quit.
How did you have any issues with maintaining your own sense of well-being and your own sense of success through that? Did you go through any kind of roller coaster of failure versus success in that journey?
Not really.
Okay.
Because I like the challenge. I like the risk. Mm-hmm. I'm always taking risk. It's something that I love taking in throughout my career is risk. I'm a creator. I've started up business units within large companies. It's what I do. So, if someone puts me in a job keeping the lights on, I'm bored in 5 minutes. That's not for me. Yeah. I'm a builder. I like to build new things. I like to work in spaces that don't exist yet. I like to invent things. That's just part of my fabric. So with that goes risk, and with that goes the understanding that you might fail. But what is failure really? It's something that we kind of assign a title to without critically examining what did we learn, mm-hmm. and how do we take that learning to the next place? Because I don't really think about it as failing. I think about it as harvesting knowledge for the next adventure. That's always the way I think about it. So, and that could be something as small as a contract and an account. It could be something like a whole job or a territory. It could be a company. So, when something comes to a close, I like to do an exercise where it's what did I learn? What do I think the other person learned? There's accountability there to make sure that, I think often in failure, it's easy to, and that's why I don't like the word, it's very easy to say, well, this happened and this happened, and you started doing an audit of the events versus the big picture of, here are the kinds of things that I'm going to take away from the situation, and be brutally honest about why that's the case, whatever it is, without saying, well, this person did this and this company did this, and therefore I didn't have the outcome I wanted. I don't mm-hmm. really go through my inventory that way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've seen a lot more articles and conversations about failure in a positive way. And I think it's so important because it's just a part of life. And I was thinking when you said about taking that inventory of what was good and where maybe were the challenges. Kim Scott, in her book Radical Candor, I know
Mm.
like she talked about in her company where in their weekly meetings, they would actually have that as part of their team meeting, that they would have somebody or have people talk about what their failures were. And then I don't know, I can't remember if there was a vote, but then they got, this special award or stuffed animal that they carried till the next week. And then, but they made it a team building event to talk about their
Mm.
failures. And I think the more that you can make that a normal thing then and have people, because I think an innovation in business requires creativity and risk taking. And I know like earlier on in your career it's kind of hard to make those judgment calls, but it's so important to develop that skill, I think, as early in your
Yeah.
career as you can.
I also, as you're talking about this, part of me is thinking that putting people on the spot, making them talk about something maybe they don't want to talk about or not ready to talk about, kind of blurs the line between work and a psychology session. So I think a lot of these HR programs or maybe work well in small environments or whatever, but I think that there's a lot of programs that maybe it was a good idea and implementing it everywhere is probably a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Making people really uncomfortable about talking about things they just don't want to. And not everyone's an extrovert. A lot of people are ambiverts or introverts, or, you've got to, I think, also respect people's way of work and way of being.
Yeah.
And I think work environments are notorious for violating people's beings and how they want to be.
No, I appreciate you brought that nuance up. Yes, it's very important to respect people and where they're at and they're comfortable, their ability to be comfortable in that situation. I would hope anybody implementing that would, allow people to choose to talk about something versus making people feel bad for not sharing. Like, yeah, there is a little bit of a balance there.
Yeah, I think you can talk about corporate America all day long around the programs that shouldn't exist.
That's so true. That is very true. I would like to talk to you about the other side of the equation of failure, and maybe it's not the exact opposite, but success.
Mm-hmm.
And have you always looked at success in the same way, or earlier in your career, did you look at it a certain way, and how has that evolved as you've reached where you're at?
I think that's tough. I think that's a really hard question. I think the failure question is easier to think about than the success question. Because this goes back to like metrics, corporate metrics, right? So, and everybody's got metrics for what they're supposed to be doing in their specific job or whatever. And so you might be hitting all the metrics and feel miserable and not know why. And so success, it's important to calibrate if you can. And I think it's harder to do earlier in your career than later, that success isn't about the metrics of your job. Success is about, what I think it's about is, what am I learning? What am I doing that makes me happy or makes other people successful? Like, this is one I like. I like, if you make everyone around you successful, you always be successful. So it's the culture of giving, the culture of sharing, the culture of, inviting doors to open because you're a giver. So success, I think, as we've defined it in, I'm hitting these metrics and I'm doing these things and I got this award and I went on this trip and these kinds of things, kind of baked into our culture, and it makes perfect sense why. But I think to ascribe your success to awards and those kinds of things can get people off track later in life.
Yeah.
Because what happens, I've talked with plenty of executive women who are in this, critical transition of, do I take another executive job? Do I start a company? What's my next thing? And they might have a complete wall of trophies and be totally unhappy and not know why. And I'm sure you've spoken with people like that too. It's like, wow, you've been so successful. Why are you so unhappy? This doesn't even make sense. And I think this goes back to success is about alignment with your value system.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's real hard, because a lot of times we might be doing work and the work is successful, but it doesn't match with our value system.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, well, yeah, I made all this money and I've got all these trophies, but I don't feel like the work I've done is meaningful. And therefore, I don't feel successful. So the success question, I think, is a really hard question to answer, because the metrics are something that is easy to point to. What's harder to point to is your growth journey that you're on and where you're going, where you want to go.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And we have an 8-week accelerator program, and one of the weeks is operation strategy. We talk about values, and we talk about corporate values. But at the same time, I think it's so important for everybody to set their own values. Like, what do I believe is core to my feeling of success in life and who I want to be as a person?
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to go through that exercise for yourself as early in your career as you can, to really guide your choices and your path. And so you don't end up, so you're more unlikely to be in a place further in your career where you don't feel that happiness with all the perceived success that you've obtained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And I think there's a bit, of flexibility that people need to give themselves too, because taking a role, going to a certain company because it's what you need to do at that time, that's okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a permanent place. I had a manager, he's amazing. He was just the best mentor. And he said, you can do anything for 2 years. 2 years is a very, very short period of time. And a 40-year career, 45-year career, people are working now. The fastest growing workforce demographic is over the age of 65, if you can believe that. So careers are longer and longer now. Mm-hmm. And 2 years is a blip on the radar. Do that, get the skill you need, get the experience, leave a great impression, leave a place better than you found it, make good relationships, and keep going, right?
Yeah. And I love that you talked about, focusing on the success of others, and that brings success to you. And that's really like what this podcast, I mean, that's essentially what it's all about, is providing experience, advice, and inspiration to help lift others in their career. I think that's so important, to look for those opportunities yourself to elevate others, whether it's somebody that you work with or somebody outside of work. And
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's hard to find people who are genuinely have that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in so many hyper competitive environments, and people stepping on each other up the ladder to the next place. And wait, I thought that person was a supporter and a mentor, and it turns out it was not what I thought it was. So I think there's a lot of, that people go through. All these people we meet on our career journey, identifying as early as possible the givers, who's really going to be a supporter and can mentor with the right type of knowledge and experience, and and versus people that are, I'm working with this person for now, we're working on a project, we're going to support each other, but not necessarily think of that person as someone that's long-term. And people surprise you, who becomes mentors and who you thought might have been a mentor that turns out not to be. So again, like exercising flexibility and how we think about people that we meet along our journey is really important.
Yeah, that's so true. And you mentioned before, I'm curious. So a lot of times life is moving at you fast and you're trying to get through the day and trying to manage a family. And how is it that you can recognize that you're not on the right path and you need to kind of switch the path that you're going on? Like it, and maybe it goes back to, I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe it's, how do you recognize personally that you are moving towards something that is not really aligned with your values, or is not going to bring you where you need to be, and that you need to make that shift?
You ask really hard questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. It can be very general. It just maybe some advice for people.
Gosh, I'm in no position to give anybody advice.
Oh, everybody is. Everybody is.
So let's start there. The only advice I can give is don't buy a $15 toaster. I think our intuition is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We know things. We sense things. We're powerful beings. Our words are powerful. Our minds are powerful. How we manifest our future is powerful. And how we intake the world and all of its complexity is powerful. And I think this informs, our intuition, our gut, what's your gut telling you? Mm-hmm. And there's going to be peaks and valleys and problems. That's actually the only guarantee, is that there will be problems and be a lot of problems, and they're going to come at you personally. They're going to come at you professionally, and managing through and evening out the peaks and valleys by being very discerning, by choosing where we put our energy. We can see the roller coaster and choose not to get on it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, oh, that's a roller coaster. I'm going to stand here on the platform. I'm going to watch it go around, and I'm not going to get on it. And all these other people are getting on that roller coaster, and I just don't want to. And so kind of putting your headspace in this visual place of intentional choice of what we choose to spend our energy on and what we don't. I think that's really hard. That's really hard. So figuring out, am I in the right place or not? Am I doing the right things? Sometimes you've got to go through stuff to get to the other side of it. And so you should just hunker down and learn. Mm-hmm. Or if you know what the outcome should be, the way you conduct yourself through that valley is also really important. And that's being very strategic about your choice of words, how you take care of yourself, your thoughts, being very guarding around what you choose to tell people and what you don't. So, figuring out if you're in the right place or the wrong place, one, like, what's your intuition telling you about where you are? And then if you know you need to stay and you know what the outcome you want looks like, how do you do that in a way that is graceful? Mm-hmm. How do you do that in a way where you're going to learn something and again, take that to the next place?
Yeah. So that was a great answer. Thank you. And I imagine making that space, one of the things for various reasons, including something like this, I tell people, is to make sure you have time blocked on your calendar every day to have just thinking time and allow yourself to ask yourself questions about where you're at. It could be related to work or personal, but if you don't give yourself that time and space, you don't know if you're on the right journey or not. And that time really gives you the opportunity to ask the questions that you just kind of talked about, and identifying if you're on the right path or if you need to make a change.
Yeah. And going back to like keeping your eyes on your own paper, there's no right path.
Mm.
There's no right path.
Right.
It's the path that is, one's own journey of growth and letting go and finding your own wisdom. And then doing that in a way where you're not really, I guess, grading yourself around where should I be and what should I be doing and all that, because that can be a lot of energy wasted. It's good to plan for sure, but then having a lot of rigidity around, well, this wasn't part of my plan. The only thing that is guaranteed is that there will be disruption. And so making sure that you've got the space to be flexible about, well, that didn't work out how I had planned. And so I'm going to go to the next place and I'm going to do a new thing. And I'm going to take all this knowledge with me. And I'm going to start again. So I think we were talking a little bit about, where should I be? You should be where you are. You should bloom where you're planted.
Yeah. Flexibility is so important. And yeah, like I love that, bloom where you're planted. That's you mentioned mentorship a little earlier. I'm curious, do you have a mentor that you can attribute some of your success in your career or life to?
Yeah, I've had a lot of mentors. I've been really lucky. The mentors that I've had were, really, when I started my career, my mentor was one of the top executive 40 years into his career. So that was really interesting, to pair up someone really young with someone who was really tenured in their career. I've had people that were paired up in that time frame where I shared with you, I took a job where it was a 0% outcome or a 200% outcome. And I was paired with a mentor who was leading a failing business. And the business was failing because it was, been in the red for a number of years. And she's a firecracker. The kinds of things that she would share with me about how to lead a business that is going to be failing until, XX year, when the revenue turns around, because the company's acquired an acquisition, is building a new technology, those kinds of things. So there are people that might be mentors that you seek out for a season or a role that you're doing, or maybe you don't have a lot of experience leading a team that isn't set up for success, or you don't have experience starting a company or moving overseas and integrating into a new culture. So mentors, I think about mentors as guides for a period of time, and then there's some mentors that stay with you for a long time. And I think that's self-selection, self-choice kind of thing. I would caution people. I know there's this whole world of business coaching and mentors and things like that. And I would caution people who are paying other people to mentor them, that I know that's probably a whole area of the economy that exists, but that's not really how I think about mentoring. I think of mentoring is that you're intentionally spending time with someone. That's a choice between the two. And you're helping shape and guide someone that you care about, help them on their path. At one point, and I don't know how this happened, I was mentoring 5 new working moms.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think I think my daughter was 10 at the time and my son was 5-ish or so. And I look back on that period of time, it's like, I don't know how I did all that stuff. Got on a plane, went to another city, had some meetings, got home, picked the kids up from school and made dinner. It's like, I don't know how I did all that. It was kind of a crazy period of time. You just do what you're supposed to do. But I think people observed I was doing that and keeping that balance and keeping the stride. And I like, hey, we think you should mentor this person. And hey, do you have some space to mentor this person? And I look up and it's like, oh, wow, I've got a bunch of working moms who are all new moms trying to figure out, how do I do this thing of having this new child and having all this responsibility of work, and how do I balance my different roles and figuring out how to fight the right battles at the right time. And I can't fight them all at the same time because I'm one person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know as a mentor, you don't necessarily have answers for everybody, but you can guide them through their thought process and let them know that they're doing great with what they're doing. But I think a lot of it is encouragement and letting people know that they are doing the right thing. But at the same time, providing your experiences and your thoughts on how to maybe look at things, how to look at things versus like what to actually do.
Yeah, I'm not going to call this mentoring, but I shared that story with my mom about my mom and her death and dying journey, and what a powerful thing that was to be able to implement her funeral and everything that she wanted exactly how she wanted. It was super cool experience to be able to plan with her that way. And I've had several people whose moms are dying or their dad has cancer or something like that, and they call me and they're like, hey, what should I expect? I'm going through this thing. And so over the last year, I have mentored people through their journey of their parents, going through that. So, and even now, I was born, my parents were older. So I always had the old parents when I was a kid, but my dad is 91. And so he lives with me and my family, and I'm a caregiver. And so that's also one of these topics that, about seasons of life. There isn't a single person that's not going to be touched by caregiving, whether that's someone in their family or their direct parent or their spouse or whatever. Everybody will be touched by caregiving at some point. And so that's its own journey. That's its own journey between your personal life and your career and how you go about doing that. And you have a lot of really difficult choices. Now, I'm super lucky that my dad and I are so close and he's so healthy. He goes and works out twice a week, if you can believe that. We had his birthday party in the metaverse this past summer.
Oh, wow.
So we have really fun times and experiences together. So it's a really fun relationship. But I know for a lot of people, it's much more difficult. So, finding mentors who have been through these things, not necessarily people at work, but people in your life that can be mentors. We tend to think about mentors in only the work context, mentors that are maybe have gone through something similar, who maybe are not part of your career life. That's always a good choice too.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're at time. Do you have a few more minutes? I could ask you a few more questions.
Yeah, I do.
Maybe
I do.
shorter. Okay.
I do.
So we talked a little bit about this from a higher level, but are there specific things that you do on a daily basis that you feel like you have to do to maintain your own mental or personal well-being?
Drinking coffee is really important. I have my coffee ritual in the morning. So I had to think about this. Like, what do I do day to day? Yeah, so I have my morning routine that I like. My best deep thinking time is early. And I've learned that if I'm waking up and I've got energy, even if it's 4 a.m. or whatever, that's kind of my signal. Okay, go and do that deep work, because I think there's so many distractions throughout the day. We have that energy to sprint a little bit. I tend to be more introverted. I work from home. I like it. It's nice and quiet. But that deep thinking work that's uninterrupted is very important, I think, for self-care, because while it's work, if I feel like things are too chaotic and things are piling up, I can't relax. So that's one of the things, is to kind of listen to, what you need. And, again, back to flexibility, be flexible about what you need to take care of yourself. Now, for me, that looks like I got to have my house in order, figuratively speaking, or I get really stressed about I've got too many things to do and I feel disorganized. Some of the other things, being outside, and but that's recharging for me. And on the weekends, I love to cook. I cook pretty much all weekend, getting everything ready. I cook big and I freeze, and I try to figure out how to cut steps. And I podcast at the same time. Like, I've got my podcast I like to listen to. And so that's my kind of getting back to the center, is taking care of my family and, doing something that I really enjoy.
Do you have a favorite cuisine that you cook, or do you try anything, or not necessarily anything, but do you like to explore?
Yeah, of course I do. Yes. So I had Indian food for the first time 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And I was in Chicago. My husband took me there, and he had a business meeting the next day. And so I went right back to that place. It was so good. And we've got a lot of grocery stores and places like that here in Dallas, Indian grocery stores. And so I bought myself a cookbook and was, watching some shows. And I'm a very, very good Indian cook now.
Yeah.
It's taken me a number of years to like really know my way around and be able to not use recipes. So that's my
Oh, wow.
kind of my standard, to like, I just know how to make things. And so I'm from an Italian family. And so my go-to is always Italian, but I like to smoke meats and I do all kinds of stuff. And, why not brisket raviolis? Of course we should make those. So I really like to cook a lot and explore. And my foray into making Indian food was kind of been my latest adventure that I go back to a lot.
Do you have a signature dish for in Indian food?
Not really.
Yeah.
I really, Rogan Josh is really good. My daughter would say, "Mom, are you making the Josh?" My kids love it too. So it's yeah.
Nice. Well, do you have a song that you'll put on when you need a little confidence or energy boost?
No,
No?
no, I really don't listen to music. That's such a strange thing, but I don't. What do I do? I like to go on walks. I've got two giant dogs, Great Pyrenees dogs. I've got, in addition to the chickens, I've got birds and a cat. And so I have any number of pets at any given time. I really love animals. So I like to spend quiet time, just
Yeah.
kind of thinking and processing, and all that overstimulation of the video calls and the noise and all of it. I don't, my go-to is not more noise.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I understand. And thank you for that answer. You do. I noticed that you did mention you'd listen to podcasts. Is there a favorite podcast that you listen to?
Yeah, I like documentaries.
Hmm.
I like documentaries. There's a podcast called Business Wars I really like.
Hmm. Okay.
So kind of, how Uber and Airbnb and, how they got started. Things that are kind of more documentaries. I love Bad Blood, John Carreyrou's whole investigation with Elizabeth Holmes was super interesting. There are this podcast, Even the Rich. It's kind of fun, but it's more of like these two girls started podcasting during the pandemic, and they tell in a series, true stories about famous people, the famous stories about families and individuals, people, Marilyn Monroe and her whole story. And they'll take you through like her life from when she was born to all of the, I guess, her transitions throughout her life. So I really like that because they're fun and silly, and have great personalities. So I enjoy listening to them too. I guess I listen to a lot of podcasts. I didn't even realize. I like the Last Week in AI is
Oh,
the one I've been listening to. It's long. So that goes on the weekends when I'm cooking, but it's pretty much a 2-hour show that's catching you up on everything that happened in artificial intelligence over the last week.
that's
And
probably a good
so
one. Yeah, to listen
two
to.
two super nerdy guys. It's not fun. It's not entertaining in that way, but depending on what kind of space that you're in where you want to continuously learn, I think podcasting is a great way to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I know this might not be a good question for you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there something that you bought in the last year, like $100 or less? And I know it's not going to be a toaster, but that
I was waiting for
that
that.
has changed the way you do things, your productivity, has improved your life in some way.
Yes. A $20 subscription to GPT
Ah,
plus.
yeah.
Yes, totally. $20 a month. Well, I guess that's not really your question. Can I do it as a monthly
No, yeah, of
answer?
course. That's a great answer. It's a perfect answer. And I agree. I think it's definitely worth paying for the chat GPT 4. And like I don't yeah, they didn't upgrade that yet, but I rely on that a lot for many different
Yeah,
things.
totally. Yeah. So I think the way that you think about that, those very easy buys, that I'm like, I didn't realize that this would impact my life so much, but it really
Hmm.
has. Like thinking about things like that is really good. Of course, I need a good coffee pot, but I don't want the $250 coffee pot that emails me when it's ready. I don't need that. I don't
Yeah,
want anything that beeps, So,
I
that's trying to
agree.
find my balance between the things that don't work well by design, like the $15 toaster, versus the things that are just really have a lot of overkill and they just need to do their job and be a coffee pot.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And it turns out a lot of times when they add all the bells and whistles and things you don't need, it just makes it too complex and it breaks down
Mm-hmm.
faster. So it's just, yeah, just sometimes you just need something basic. Is there a book that you have read that has made an impact on your career that you would maybe recommend to the audience?
I'll share a secret with you.
Oh, okay.
I don't like business books.
Okay.
I think they're totally boring and I really don't
Yeah,
like them.
they can be, yes.
I shouldn't be
That's so
saying that as
true.
a business person, but I just really don't like business books. I love there's a book I read. I've read it 4 times. It's The Pillars of the Earth. It's by
Mm.
Ken Follett. Are you familiar with it?
It's been yeah, I read it a long time ago. It's an
Yeah,
older book.
it
Yeah.
is. It's an old book. I got a signed copy. I love this book because I love the character development. I love how long the story is. I like how the characters are under pressure and they go through their own seasons of life and find the resilience. I love Alina and her ability to overcome adversity.
Mm.
And, so I love that story. I think it's a really amazing story. It is my favorite book.
Mm. Thank you. I'm going to pull that back out and take a relook at that. I have to say it's been probably over 20 years
Yeah.
ago. Is it that old? I don't know.
I
Maybe
think it
I'm,
is. I think it is
yeah.
that old. It is. I get it out every number of years and it's a, kind of by the fire. So I really love that
Yeah,
book.
there are just some books that are just timeless. But so thank you, Elizabeth, for your time. And you are now part of our audience's Hype Squad. And as part of their Hype Squad, is there one final piece of advice that you would leave everybody with before we end the conversation?
Yeah, I would tell people that you know more than you think you do.
Hmm.
To really pay attention to your intuition, and when you see a red flag, kind of put that in your memory as a piece of information to kind of use as your overall kind of critical decision making, trusting your gut and trusting yourself really.
Yeah. I totally agree. So it was great words of advice to end our conversation on. And if anybody wants to reach out to you or find you on social media, by email, is there a good place they can find you? What one, is it okay to look you up? And if so, what's the best way?
LinkedIn is the best way to find me. If I'm there, my company's there. I do a lot of writing and publishing, a lot of papers and around the area of work that I do, which is revenue. I've been a go-to-market accelerator. That's an AI first company. So I'm really exploring the edges of the emerging tech that's out there and how it applies to us in our work.
Yeah. All very important stuff that I think everybody should be aware of and be looking at. So, well, thank you, Elizabeth, again. I really appreciate your time and for sharing everything that you've shared and your vulnerability. It was very insightful and I think very helpful to the people listening. So appreciate everything.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been great.
Yeah, we'll talk with you soon. Have a great day.
All right, bye.
Bye. Hi, everyone. This is Michelle again. If you enjoyed this conversation, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly episodes. And if you're really feeling it, please leave a review. We'd love to have your support. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter where we share things we're excited about, things we found funny or inspiring, and must-read leadership videos and articles we came across that week. You can subscribe by going to www.thebosstrack.com/weekly joy. That's www.thebosstrack.com/weekly joy. Drop in your email and you'll get the very next one. Thanks for listening.